A cold
For
king was
you, my
cursed to
dear.
marry the first woman he touched.
You are
For
too
3 years, he
kind.
avoided every living soul like death itself. Then fate struck. He collided with a fleeing maid. The curse activated. 87 days, wed or die. That bastard servant became the most powerful queen in the kingdom's history. Her family mocked her. The nobles sneered. Assassins hunted her. But they made one fatal mistake. They underestimated Rosalind Ashwood. This is how she brought them all to their knees. The sound of bone hitting marble echoed through the west wing of Ashwood Manor. Rosalind's knees struck the floor. Pain shot up her legs, white-hot and immediate. She didn't cry out. Crying only made it worse. The soup bowl shattered beside her. Boiling broth splashed across her hands. The skin turned red, instantly blistering. Still, she didn't make a sound. Lady Margaret Ashwood stood above, her silver hair pulled back so tight it stretched the skin around her temples. Her green eyes were the color of pond water in winter. Cold. Dead. "You missed a spot," Margaret said. Her voice was silk wrapped around a blade. Rosa looked at the floor. There was no spot. The marble gleamed like black glass. She'd spent 4 hours on her knees scrubbing it that morning. 4 hours until her shoulders burned and her hands bled through the rough linen of her work dress. But that didn't matter. Nothing mattered except what Lady Margaret said mattered. "Yes, my lady." Rosa's voice barely rose above a whisper. She kept her eyes down. Eye contact was defiance. Defiance earned the crop. Footsteps clicked across the floor. Expensive shoes, hand-cobbled Italian leather that cost more than Rosa would see in a year. Isolde Ashwood stopped directly in front of her half-sister, 21 years old, golden-haired, beautiful, in the way only the wealthy and protected could be. Her skin had never seen a day of hard labor. Her hands had never touched a scrub brush. She lifted one delicate foot. The heel came down on Rosa's burned hand. The pain was exquisite, blinding. Rosa bit through her bottom lip, tasted copper, but she didn't pull away. Pulling away was resistance. Resistance earned worse than the crop. "A bastard deserves no better than this," Isolde said sweetly. She ground her heel down. The blister popped. Clear fluid mixed with blood on the marble floor. "Don't you agree, sister?" The word sister dripped with mockery. Rosa said nothing. Inside her mind, a voice whispered the same words she'd whispered to herself every night for 24 years. One day you'll be sorry. One day I'll make you sorry." But that day wasn't today. Today she was still on her knees. Isolde lifted her foot. She examined the blood on her shoe with distaste, then wiped it on Rosa's shoulder, smearing red across the gray fabric. "Clean that up," Margaret commanded. "And when you're finished, come to the drawing room. We have news." They walked away. Their footsteps faded down the corridor, leaving Rosa alone with her pain and the spreading pool of soup and blood. She stayed on her knees for a full minute, breathing, just breathing. Then she reached for the rag. Her hands shook. They always shook after Isolde visited, but she wrapped the rag around her burned palm and began to clean. The blood came up easily. Blood always did on marble. It was the shame that stained permanent. The drawing room smelled of roses and expensive tobacco. Rosa stood just inside the doorway, head bowed, hands clasped behind her back to hide the bandage she'd wrapped around her palm. The rough cotton was already soaking through with blood and fluid from the burst blister. Lady Margaret sat in the high-backed chair near the fireplace. Even in summer, she kept fires burning. Said the cold bothered her bones. Rosa suspected she just liked the way the flames cast shadows across her face, making her look more intimidating. It worked. Isolde reclined on the velvet settee, one hand draped dramatically across her forehead. She changed into a pink silk dress that probably cost more than the entire servants' quarters. Her golden hair cascaded over the cushions like spilled honey. "Do you know what day it is?" Margaret asked. Rosa's mind flickered through the calendar. "July 15th, a Tuesday. Nothing special." "No, my lady. It's the day your miserable existence finally becomes useful." Margaret lifted a letter from the side table. The seal was broken, but Rosa could still see the royal crest, a crowned wolf surrounded by thorns, the seal of Glacium Kingdom. Her heart stuttered. "The palace has sent a summons," Margaret continued. "King Cassian Frostborn requires all noble families to send their eligible daughters to court. He will choose a queen." The word queen hung in the air like smoke. Isolde sat up, her dramatic pose forgotten. "Mother, you can't be serious. Everyone knows what he is, what he's done. What he's cursed with," Margaret corrected. "There's a difference. They say anyone who touches him dies within a year." Isolde's voice climbed toward hysteria. They say he's been alone in that palace for 3 years because he's too dangerous to be near. They say they say many things. Margaret's tone could have thrown with frozen fire. Most of them exaggerated by superstitious fools. But Rosa heard the tremor underneath. Lady Margaret was afraid. Isolde stood, her dress rustling. I won't go. I won't. You can't make me marry a monster. You won't be marrying anyone, Margaret said. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. Rosa felt the weight of it settling on her shoulders before Margaret even turned. Those cold green eyes locked onto her. You will go in Isolde's place. The words didn't make sense at first. Rosa's mind stumbled over them, trying to arrange them into an order that followed logic. My lady. Her voice came out small, broken. You heard me. Margaret stood crossing to where Rosa stood frozen. The summons requires the presence of an Ashwood daughter. You are unfortunately still legally Edmund Ashwood's child. His bastard, yes. His shame, certainly. But his blood, nonetheless. Understanding crashed over Rosa like ice water. They were sending her to die. The letter says I must deliver correspondence to the palace personally. Margaret continued. You will wear Isolde's old dress. You will take the letter. You will present yourself to the palace guards. What happens after that, she waved her hand dismissively, is between you and fate. Mother, this is brilliant. Isolde was smiling now, a wide, genuine smile that looked wrong on her beautiful face. If the curse is real, she dies instead of me. If it's not, well, she laughed. At least the bastard will be out of our house. Rosa's throat closed. Her chest felt tight, like someone was pulling stays too tight around her ribs. Please, she whispered. Please don't make me. The slap came fast. Margaret's palm connected with Rosa's cheek hard enough to snap her head sideways. Stars burst behind her eyes. You will do as you're told, Margaret hissed. You are nothing. You have always been nothing. Your mother was a whore who seduced my husband, and you are the living reminder of his weakness. If you can die to protect my daughter, to protect our family name, then you will die and count yourself blessed to finally be useful. Rosa's cheek throbbed. She could taste blood again from where her teeth had cut the inside of her mouth. And if I refuse, the words came out before she could stop them. Defiance. Stupid, foolish defiance. Margaret leaned in close. Her breath smelled of peppermint and malice. Then I will have you thrown into the street tonight with nothing but the clothes on your back. No references. No money, no name. You'll be dead in a week, but it will be a much slower, uglier death than whatever the king might give you. She straightened, smoothing her skirts. The choice is yours, of course. We're not monsters. Her smile was all teeth. Go to the palace tomorrow morning. Deliver the letter, face the curse, or leave tonight and face the streets. Isolde giggled. The sound was bright and terrible. Either way, she said, we finally get rid of you. Rosa's room was in the attic, a narrow space under the eaves barely tall enough to stand in at the center. One small window looked out over the kitchen gardens, a thin mattress on a wooden frame, a single blanket, a wash basin and pitcher, 24 years of life, and this was all she had to show for it. She sat on the edge of the bed, hands folded in her lap, and tried to stop shaking. Tomorrow. Tomorrow they would send her to the palace. Tomorrow she would face King Cassian Frostborn, the cursed king who couldn't touch another living soul without condemning them to death. If the stories were true, if they weren't, she'd probably be executed for fraud, for pretending to be a noble lady when she was just a bastard maid in a borrowed dress. Either way, she was dead. No. The thought came sharp and sudden. No, not like this. Rosa stood. She crossed to the small trunk at the foot of her bed and opened it. Inside were her few possessions. 2 work dresses, an extra pair of stockings with holes in the heels, a ribbon her mother had worn, the only thing she had left of the woman who'd died bringing her into this world. And books. 6 books she'd stolen from Isolde's room over the years, one at a time, smuggled up to the attic and hidden under her mattress. Books on etiquette, on history, on the old laws and customs of the kingdom. She'd read them all dozens of times, memorized every page. Not because she thought she'd ever need to know how to curtsy to a duchess or which fork to use at a formal dinner, but because reading was the only thing that made her feel human. Now sitting in the darkness of her attic room with death waiting at dawn, Rosa pulled out the oldest book, The Ancient Laws and Treaties of Glacium. She opened it to the chapter on royal curses, and she began to read. The dress didn't fit. Isolde's cast-off gown was too small in the chest, too short in the sleeves, too tight around the ribs. The stays had to be laced so brutally that Rosa saw black spots dancing at the edges of her vision. But it was silk, pale blue silk with delicate embroidery along the bodice, the kind of dress Rosa had only ever touched while washing it. Now she wore it. She looked at herself in the small mirror in Isolde's dressing room. A stranger looked back. Chestnut hair pulled into a simple bun, gray eyes too large and a too pale face. Cheekbones sharp from years of eating after the family had finished surviving on scraps and kitchen leavings. She looked like a maid playing dress-up, which she supposed was exactly what she was. "Don't forget the cloak," Margaret said from the doorway. She tossed a heavy wool cloak onto the chair. "Keep the hood up if anyone asks you're feeling unwell. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't make eye contact. Deliver the letter to the palace guards and leave." Rosa picked up the cloak. The wool was good quality but old moth-eaten in places. "What if they ask me to stay?" "They won't." Margaret's smile was cold. "The king hasn't seen visitors in 3 years. The guards will take the letter and send you away. You'll be home by nightfall." Liar, Rosa thought, but she said nothing. She fastened the cloak around her shoulders and pulled the hood up. Lady Margaret studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Go. The carriage is waiting." Rosa walked past her out of the room down the stairs she'd scrubbed 1,000 times. Isolde watched from the landing, eating sugared almonds from a silver dish. "Try not to die too quickly," she called out sweetly. "Make it interesting at least." Rosa didn't look back. She walked out the front door. The front door she'd never been allowed to use before, and climbed into the carriage. The driver didn't look at her, didn't speak, just snapped the reins. The horses lurched forward. Ashwood Manor disappeared behind a curtain of morning mist, and Rosalind Ashwood rode toward her death. The palace of Glacium Kingdom rose from the mountainside like a crown of black stone and ice. Rosa had seen it from a distance before on clear days when the mountain roads were visible from the manor. But up close it was something else entirely. Massive, ancient, built from dark granite that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Towers stretched toward the sky, their peaks lost in cloud cover. Windows like empty eyes. Walls thick enough to withstand sieges. It looked like the kind of place where curses were born. The carriage stopped at the outer gates. A guard approached his armor, polished to mirror brightness. He looked at the carriage with the Ashwood crest, then at Rosa's hooded face. "State your business." Rosa's throat was dry. She pulled the letter from her cloak pocket. Her hands shook. "I bring correspondence for His Majesty, from House Ashwood." The guard took the letter, examined the seal, then nodded. "You'll need to deliver it personally. Palace protocol." No, that wasn't supposed to happen. Margaret said, "The guards will escort you inside." He continued, gesturing to 2 more soldiers. "Follow them. Don't wander." The carriage door opened. Rosa had no choice. She stepped out onto the cobblestones, her legs nearly giving out beneath her. The guards flanked her. One in front, one behind. They walked toward the palace entrance. The massive doors swung open, groaning on ancient hinges, and Rosalind Ashwood stepped inside. The palace interior was a maze. Corridors stretched in every direction, twisting and turning like the insides of some great stone beast. The walls were bare stone, unadorned, except for occasional tapestries depicting battles and coronations from centuries past. Torches burned in iron sconces, but their light seemed weak here, swallowed by shadows that moved in ways shadows shouldn't move. Rosa kept her hood up, kept her eyes down, followed the guard in front of her. Her heart was a drum, loud, frantic. She could hear it pounding in her ears, drowning out the sound of their footsteps on the stone floor. "Just deliver the letter. Just deliver it and leave. You can do this. You can..." Behind her a sound, footsteps, running. The guard behind her turned. "Halt, who goes?" Something rushed past them. A figure in dark clothes moving fast papers clutched to his chest. The wind from his passage caught the papers. They flew from his hands, scattering across the corridor like white birds. "Damn it!" The man skidded to a stop, spinning around, and Rosa saw his face. He was older than she expected. Mid-30s, she guessed. Tall, broad-shouldered beneath the formal black coat. Dark hair swept back from a face that would have been handsome if not for the coldness in it. Sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, a thin scar cutting down his left cheek from temple to jaw, and his eyes, ice blue, the color of winter sky. Empty of warmth. King Cassian Frostborn. It had to be. No one else in this palace would move with that kind of authority, that absolute certainty of ownership. Rosa's breath caught. The guards bowed immediately. Your Majesty? I know, Cassian snapped. He was already moving, chasing after the papers as they drifted down the corridor on an errant breeze. Rosa watched him go, her mind spinning. The king. That was the king. The cursed king who hasn't touched another person in 3 years. Who can't touch anyone without... A paper drifted past her face. Without thinking, she reached for it. The breeze shifted. The paper danced away just out of reach. Rosa stepped forward, still reaching. She didn't see the corner. Didn't see Cassian returning from the other direction, arms full of recovered papers, not looking where he was going. They collided at the intersection. Hard. The impact knocked the breath from her lungs. Papers exploded into the air again. She stumbled backward, her hood falling away. Cassian stumbled forward. His hands came up instinctively, reaching for balance. His gloves, soft black leather, caught on the stone wall. The impact tore them from his hands. And as they both fell, as gravity pulled them down toward the marble floor, his bare hand touched hers. Skin against skin, palm to palm. The world exploded into darkness. The cold hit first. Not the cold of winter wind or snow. This was deeper, older. The cold of the space between stars. The cold of the void. It rushed through Rosa's veins like liquid nitrogen, freezing her from the inside out. She tried to scream, couldn't. Her lungs had stopped working. Light erupted from the point where their hands met. Not white light, not golden. Black light, if such a thing could exist. Darkness made visible. Shadows given form. It spread up her arm, down her chest, across her face, and it burned. Ice that burned like fire. Fire that froze like ice. Somewhere distant, she heard shouting. Voices raised in alarm, footsteps running. But she couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything except feel the darkness spreading through her body like ink through water. This is it, she thought dimly. This is how I die. Then as suddenly as it began, the darkness receded. The cold vanished. She could breathe again. Rosa gasped, drawing in air like a drowning woman breaking the surface. Her chest heaved. Her whole body shook. She was on the floor. Marble pressed cold against her back. The ceiling swam above her, stone arches spinning. Someone was gripping her shoulders, shaking her. Breathe, a voice commanded. Just breathe. She focused on the voice, followed it back to consciousness. King Cassian knelt over her, his bare hands on her shoulders. His ice blue eyes were wide with something that looked like horror. What? She tried to speak. Her voice was a broken rasp. Don't talk. He looked up, shouting at someone beyond her field of vision. Get Aldebrand, now. Footsteps pounded away. Cassian looked back down at her. His jaw was clenched, so tight she could see the muscle jumping in his cheek. Who are you? He demanded. Rosa tried to sit up. Her body didn't want to obey. Everything felt wrong, too heavy, too light, like she was floating and drowning at the same time. She swallowed, tried again. I'm nobody. I'm just... Look at your wrist. She didn't want to, but his tone left no room for argument. Slowly she lifted her right hand. A mark had appeared on her inner wrist. Intricate patterns of frost and ice woven together in an impossible design. Silver white against her skin, glowing faintly with its own light. Beautiful and terrible. It didn't look like a brand or a tattoo. It looked like it had grown there, like it was part of her now. What is this? She whispered. Cassian held up his own wrist. The same mark, identical, glowing on his skin like a twin star. The curse, he said. His voice was flat, empty. It's activated. The royal physician arrived within minutes. Aldebrand was ancient, bent with age, his beard white as fresh snow. But his hands were steady as he examined the marks on their wrists, muttering in a language Rosa didn't recognize. They'd moved to a side chamber. A small room with stone walls and a fireplace that wasn't lit. Guards stood at the door, their hands on their sword hilts. Rosa sat in a chair, trying not to shake, trying not to think about the mark on her wrist or the way it pulsed faintly in time with her heartbeat. Cassian paced, back and forth, a caged wolf. Finally, Aldebrand straightened. Your Majesty, he said quietly, the curse has chosen. The words fell into the room like stones into a well. Cassian stopped pacing. Explain. 3 years ago, Morgravine the sorceress placed a binding curse upon you. The terms were clear. The first woman whose bare skin touched yours would become bound to you by fate. You would have 90 days to marry her. If you refused, or if the marriage did not take place within that time, we both die, Cassian finished. I remember. Aldebrand nodded gravely. The frost marks are proof. The curse has activated. The countdown has begun. 90 days, Rosa thought numbly. 90 days and then I die. How many days? Cassian's voice was cold as the mark on his skin. I need to consult my text to be certain, but based on the intensity of the marks. Aldebrand pulled a small device from his robes, some kind of compass, but instead of pointing north, the needle spun wildly before settling. 87 days, Your Majesty. 87 days until the curse completes. Silence, Rosa. Rosa couldn't breathe again. 87 days, less than 3 months. She thought she was going to die today. This was worse. This was dying slowly, watching the days count down like sand through an hourglass. Cassian finally turned to look at her. Really look at her. His gaze swept over her face, her borrowed dress, her work-roughened hands. She saw the exact moment he registered what she was. You're a servant. It wasn't a question. Rosa's throat closed. She nodded. From which house? Ashwood, Your Majesty. Ashwood, he said the name like it tasted bitter. And they sent you here, why, to deliver a letter to spy. To die, she whispered. The words hung in the air. Cassian stared at her. For a moment, something flickered in those cold eyes. Something that might have been understanding. Or pity. Then it was gone. What's your name? Rosalind. Rosalind Ashwood. But everyone calls me Rosa. Rosalind Ashwood. He tested the name. And you're a servant in House Ashwood? Not a daughter. She hesitated. Then decided truth was all she had left. I'm both. My father was Lord Edmund Ashwood. My mother was a maid. I'm his bastard. His shame. They sent me here in place of my half-sister because they thought the curse would kill me and better a bastard die than a legitimate heir. Silence. Aldebrand made a small sound of distress. Cassian's expression didn't change, but his hands curled into fists at his sides. So your family, he said slowly, sent you here to die in their place. Yes, Your Majesty. And you came anyway. I didn't have a choice. It was this or the streets. You always have a choice. Not when you're nothing, Rosa said. The words came out sharper than she intended. Bitter. Not when you're a bastard who's been told her whole life that her only value is in dying quietly when convenient. Cassian studied her for a long moment. Then he turned to Aldebrand. Is there any way to break the curse without marriage? The old physician shook his head. I've spent 3 years researching, Your Majesty. The only way to break Morgravine's curse is marriage. True marriage. Before the 87 days are complete. And if we marry, the curse is fulfilled. It breaks. You both live. And if we don't, Aldebrand's silence was answer enough. Cassian closed his eyes, drew in a long breath, let it out slowly. When he opened his eyes again, they were empty of everything except resignation. He crossed to where Rosa sat and looked down at her. Stand up. She stood. Her legs shook but held. They were almost the same height. She could see the faint lines around his eyes, the silver threading through his dark hair at the temples. Could see the scar on his cheek up close, an old wound long healed. Could see that he was just a man, a tired, angry, lonely man. I won't let you die, Cassian said quietly. I've killed enough people with this curse. I won't add you to the count. Something in Rosa's chest loosened, just a little. Thank you, Your Majesty. But I won't marry you either. The looseness snapped back into a knot. We'll find another way, Cassian continued. Aldebrand will research. I'll consult every scholar and mage in the kingdom. There has to be another solution. A loophole. Something. He stepped back, creating distance between them. Until then, you'll stay in the palace. You'll be given quarters, food, clothing, whatever you need. But you are not my betrothed. You are not my future queen. You are... He trailed off, searching for the right word. A prisoner, Rosa finished softly. Cassian's jaw tightened. A guest, he corrected. An unwilling guest, but a guest nonetheless. And if we don't find another way, if the 87 days run out and we haven't broken the curse, then I'll marry you. His voice was ice, because the alternative is condemning you to death for a curse that's my burden to bear. And I won't do that. He turned to the guards. Buck her to the east wing. Give her one of the guest suites. Make sure she has everything she needs. Yes, Your Majesty. And send word to House Ashwood. Tell them their daughter is staying at the palace, indefinitely. The guard bowed and left. Cassian looked at Rosa one more time. The frost mark on his wrist pulsed, matching the rhythm of hers. I'm sorry, he said. I'm sorry you got pulled into this. I'm sorry your family used you as a sacrifice. And I'm sorry that touching me has condemned you to 87 days of uncertainty. He walked toward the door, stopped, didn't turn around. But most of all, I'm sorry that you'll spend those 87 days hoping I can save you, knowing that I might fail." Then he was gone. The door closed. Rosa stood alone in the empty room, the frost mark burning cold on her wrist, and finally let herself cry. Not because she was going to die, but because for the first time in her life, someone had apologized for hurting her, and she didn't know how to bear it. The guest suite was larger than her entire attic room at Ashwood Manor. A four-poster bed with silk hangings, a wardrobe filled with dresses in various sizes, a writing desk, a fireplace, windows that looked out over mountains and sky. It was beautiful. It was a cage. Rosa stood at the window watching the sun set behind the peaks. The frost mark on her wrist glowed faintly in the dimming light. 87 days. She had 87 days to live. Unless the king found a way to break the curse. Unless he married her. Unless. A knock at the door. "Come in," she called. A woman entered, older perhaps 50 with kind eyes and silver-streaked brown hair. She wore the uniform of palace staff, simple but well-made. "Miss Ashwood, I'm Eleanor. I'll be your lady's maid while you're here." Rosa almost laughed. "Bliss I am. A lady's maid, for the bastard, for the girl who'd been a servant herself 3 hours ago." "You don't have to do that," she said. "His Majesty's orders, miss. You're to be treated as a guest of the palace. That means you get a lady's maid." Eleanor crossed to the wardrobe and began pulling out dresses. "We'll need to see what fits. Most of these should be adjustable. And tomorrow we'll have the seamstress come measure you for proper gowns." "I don't need proper gowns." "With respect, miss, you do. You'll be dining with His Majesty. He's very particular about dress code." Rosa's stomach dropped. "I'll be what?" "Dining with His Majesty, every evening. He said you're to join him in the small dining room at 7. "Why?" Eleanor smiled gently. "I imagine he wants to get to know the woman fate chose for him. Curse or no curse, you're bound together now. Might as well become acquaintances." She laid a deep green dress on the bed. "This one should suit you. Green brings out the gray in your eyes." Rosa looked at the dress, looked at her reflection in the mirror, looked at the frost mark on her wrist. 87 days to live, or to prove she was more than a bastard servant, or to die trying. "What time is it now?" she asked. "5:30, miss. An hour and a half until dinner. An hour and a half until she sat across from the man who held her life in his hands. The man who'd apologized for hurting her. The man who'd called her a guest instead of a prisoner. The cursed king who couldn't touch anyone without condemning them to death. Except he'd already touched her. And now they were bound. For 87 more days, or forever. Rosa took the green dress from Eleanor's hands. "Help me get ready," she said quietly. "If I'm going to be a guest in this palace, I might as well look the part." Eleanor's smile widened. "Yes, miss. Let's show them what a real lady looks like." And for the first time since arriving at the palace, since feeling the curse burn through her veins, since watching her old life disappear behind carriage wheels and morning mist, Rosalind Ashwood smiled back. Day 1 of 87. The countdown had begun. The palace woke before dawn. Rosa heard it from her bed footsteps in distant corridors, the clang of pots from kitchens 3 floors below the change of the guard outside her door. Sounds she recognized from years of being the first awake at Ashwood Manor, lighting fires and hauling water while the family slept in silk sheets. But here she was the one in silk sheets. Here she was the guest, the prisoner, the woman with 86 days left to live. She touched the frost mark on her wrist. It pulsed beneath her fingertips, alive and cold. A heartbeat made of ice. During the night, she'd dreamed of winter, endless fields of snow, a sky the color of steel, and a voice calling her name through the wind. When she woke, frost had formed on the inside of her windows. In July. A knock interrupted her thoughts. "Miss Ashwood," Eleanor's voice warm and steady. "May I come in?" "Yes." The door opened. Eleanor entered carrying a breakfast tray, fresh bread, butter, jammed soft-boiled eggs, tea that smelled of bergamot and honey. The kind of breakfast Rosa used to serve to Isolde, while her own stomach cramped with hunger. "Eat quickly, miss. Sir Aldwyn will be here in an hour to begin your lessons." Rosa sat up. Lessons. His Majesty's orders. If you're to remain in the palace, you need to know how to conduct yourself in court. Eleanor set the tray on the bedside table. Etiquette, protocol, the proper forms of address, how to walk, how to sit, how to speak to nobles without causing offense. "I know how to speak to nobles," Rosa said quietly. "I spent 24 years doing it. You keep your head down, your voice soft, and you agree with everything they say." Eleanor's expression softened. "That's how a servant speaks to nobles, miss. Now you need to learn how a lady speaks to them. A lady. The word felt foreign in her mouth, like trying on clothes that didn't fit. But she ate the breakfast, drank the tea, let Eleanor help her into a day dress of soft gray wool that made her eyes look like storm clouds. And when Sir Aldwin arrived, a thin man with silver hair and a measuring gaze, she stood straight and met his eyes. "Miss Ashwood," he said, "let's begin." Days 2 through 5 blurred together. Walking lessons. How to glide instead of trudge. How to hold her shoulders back, her chin level. Rosa's feet ached from the unfamiliar shoes, her back burned from maintaining perfect posture. But she remembered. She remembered everything. That was her gift. Her curse. The thing that had made her valuable to Lord Ashwood when he needed someone to memorize his correspondence, useless to Lady Margaret when she wanted a daughter who could forget. Eidetic memory. Perfect recall. Sir Aldwin would demonstrate a curtsy once. Rosa would execute it perfectly on the second try. He would recite the ranking of noble houses. She would repeat them back without error. He would explain the 17 different forms of formal address depending on rank, gender, and occasion. She would absorb them like a sponge absorbing water. By day 3, he stopped looking surprised. By day 4, he started testing her with increasingly obscure protocol. By day 5, he smiled. "You're a quick study, Miss Ashwood." "I've had practice," she said. "I used to steal my sister's etiquette books, read them by candlelight after everyone slept." Why? The question caught her off guard. Why had she read them? She'd known she'd never need proper etiquette, known she'd never attend balls or dinners or court functions, known she was destined to die in the attic room where she'd been born a bastard daughter no one wanted. "'Cause," she said slowly, "it made me feel like I could be someone else, even if just in my head." Sir Aldwin studied her for a long moment. "You're not someone else, Miss Ashwood. You're exactly who you've always been. The palace is simply giving you the chance to show it." That night, alone in her room, Rosa cried, not from sadness, from something she couldn't name. Day 6, 81 days remaining. The small dining room was intimate by palace standards. Only one long table seating for 12. Crystal chandeliers. Windows overlooking the mountain valleys. Tapestries depicting hunting scenes, wolves bringing down stags, hawks, striking doves. Rosa sat at one end of the table. King Cassian sat at the other. 30 feet of polished wood separated them. It might as well have been 30 miles. He hadn't looked at her when she entered, hadn't acknowledged her presence. Just continued reading the documents spread before him, a glass of dark wine untouched at his elbow. Servants brought the first course, soup creamy and pale in bowls rimmed with gold. Rosa picked up her spoon. The right spoon, the soup spoon, the one on the outside. She'd memorized the order. Soup, fish, salad, meat, dessert. Outside to inside. Simple. She ate in silence. Cassian read in silence. The only sounds were silver on china and the crackling of the fire. 10 minutes passed. 20. Finally, Cassian set down his papers. "You read." Not a question, a statement. Rosa looked up, met those ice-blue eyes across the distance. "Yes, Your Majesty." "What do you read? Anything I can find. History, law, poetry, whatever books I could steal from my sister's room without her noticing." "You stole books." "Yes. Why not simply ask for them?" The laugh escaped before she could stop it, bitter and sharp. "Your Majesty, I was a bastard servant in my father's house. I wasn't allowed to ask for anything. I took what I could when I could, and I was grateful for it." Cassian's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. "What's the last book you read?" She didn't have to think about it. "The Ancient Laws and Treaties of Glacium, second edition, published in the reign of King Aldous III. That book is 300 years old. 347 years old. The second edition was published 16 years after the first because the original contained errors in the transcription of the Treaty of Frost and Fire." Silence. Cassian leaned back in his chair, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "You memorized it." "I memorize everything I read. I can't help it. My mind just holds on to things. Everything. Every word, every page. I can see them in my head like I'm reading them again." More silence. Then, "Recite the 7th clause of the Treaty of Frost and Fire." Rosa closed her eyes, saw the page in her mind, yellowed parchment ink, faded but legible. "In the event of transgression against the sacred bond, the offending party shall forfeit all claims to sovereignty and submit to the judgment of the assembled houses with no appeal saved to the gods themselves. She opened her eyes. Cassian was staring at her. That's correct, he said quietly, word for word. I told you, I remember everything. That's, he trailed off, shook his head. That's remarkable. Is it? Rosa set down her spoon. I'm cursed to die in 81 days, Your Majesty. A good memory doesn't seem particularly useful under the circumstances. It might be more useful than you think. How? But Cassian didn't answer. He returned to his papers, effectively dismissing her. The rest of the meal passed in silence. But when she stood to leave, he spoke again. Tomorrow night, same time. Your Majesty, we'll dine together every evening until we find a way to break this curse. If we're bound by fate, we might as well become acquainted. He still didn't look at her, but his voice was less cold, less distant, almost human. Rosa curtsied the perfect curtsy Sir Aldwin had taught her. As you wish, Your Majesty. She left him alone with his papers and his wine, and the frost mark on her wrist pulsed warm for the first time since it had appeared. Day 15, 72 days remaining. The royal banquet. Rosa had hoped to avoid it, hoped Cassian would let her remain in the shadows safe from the scrutiny of the court. Instead, he insisted she attend. You're not a secret, he'd said at dinner the night before. You're the woman bound to me by curse. They need to see you, to accept you, to understand that you're not going anywhere. So she wore the green dress Eleanor had chosen, the one that brought out her eyes, had her hair pinned up in a style that exposed the line of her neck, the curve of her shoulders. Looked in the mirror and saw a stranger. A lady, not a servant. The banquet hall was a cavern of light and sound, hundreds of candles in crystal chandeliers, tables laden with food, roasted meats, glazed fruits, elaborate pastries shaped like swans and roses, musicians playing in the gallery above, nobles in their finest clothes, jewels winking like captured stars. Rosa entered on Cassian's arm. Every head turned, the music faltered, then resumed, but the whispers didn't stop. That's her, the bastard. I heard she used magic to trap him. Poor man, to be cursed with her. Rosa's face burned, but she kept walking, kept her spine straight, kept her expression neutral. Cassian leaned down, his mouth near her ear. Ignore them. You're worth 10 of anyone in this room. I'm a servant wearing borrowed clothes. You're a woman with perfect memory and a spine of steel. The clothes are just decoration. He led her to the high table, seated her at his right hand, the place of honor, the place where a queen would sit. The nobles stared, some with curiosity, some with disdain, some with calculation, already wondering how to use her or use her connection to the king. Dinner began. Rosa ate carefully, used the correct utensils, maintained perfect posture. Engaged in polite conversation with the Duchess on her right, a woman with kind eyes and gray hair who asked about her interests instead of her parentage. She was doing well. The wine arrived. A servant poured for her, red wine deep as blood. Rosa lifted the glass, took a sip. It tasted wrong, bitter underneath the fruit, sharp in a way wine shouldn't be. She set the glass down, looked up, and saw a servant she didn't recognize watching her with knowing eyes. Understanding hit like a fist. They'd poisoned her wine. Not enough to kill, just enough to sicken, to humiliate, to make her vomit or faint or lose control in front of the entire court, to prove she didn't belong. Rosa's stomach was already churning. The room tilted. She gripped the edge of the table, fighting to stay upright. Cassian noticed immediately. Rosalind, I'm fine, she managed. Just warm. A lie. She was freezing, sweating, her vision blurred at the edges. Protocol. She had to remember the protocol. What came next? What was she supposed to do when the king stood to give a toast? She closed her eyes, saw the pages from Sir Aldwin's lessons, saw the words written in elegant script. When the king rises to toast, all nobles must rise in unison. The honored guest responds with a brief acknowledgement, no more than 3 sentences. The first toast is always to the kingdom, the second to the crown, the third to those gathered. Cassian stood. The room rose with him, including Rosa, though her legs shook so badly she thought they might give out. To Glacium, Cassian said, raising his glass, may she endure. To Glacium, the room echoed. They drank. Rosa pretended to drink, lifted the glass to her lips, didn't swallow. Cassian sat. The room sat. Rosa sat and the world spun. But she'd done it. She'd followed protocol despite the poison working through her veins. The Duchess leaned over. My dear, you look quite pale. Are you unwell? Just the heat, Rosa said. I'm not accustomed to such grandeur. She made it through the next course, and the next, made polite conversation, smiled when appropriate, laughed at the Duke's terrible jokes about hunting season, all while fighting the urge to be sick on the floor. When Cassian finally rose to signal the end of the banquet, Rosa stood with everyone else, curtsied to the king, smiled at the nobles who approached to introduce themselves, and the moment she was released, she walked calmly to the ladies' withdrawing room and vomited until her stomach was empty and her throat burned. Eleanor found her there, kneeling on cold tile, gasping. "Miss Ashwood." "Poison," Rosa managed. "The wine." "Dear God, we need to get you to Aldebrand." "No, Rosa gripped Eleanor's hand. "No physicians, no fuss. I got through it. I didn't embarrass His Majesty. That's what matters." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "You shouldn't have to endure this." "I've endured worse." Rosa stood on shaking legs. "And I'll endure more before this is over." She rinsed her mouth, fixed her hair, smoothed her dress. When she emerged from the withdrawing room, Cassian was waiting in the corridor. He took one look at her and understood. "Who?" he asked quietly. "Does it matter? They'll try again anyway." "It matters to me." "Then investigate. Punish them if you must. But don't—" She swayed. He caught her elbow, steadying her. "Don't make me testify. Don't make me stand in front of the court and relive it. Please, Judge." Cassian studied her face for a long moment. Then he lifted her hand, the one with the frost mark. "You survived tonight with grace and strength. You followed every protocol perfectly despite being poisoned. Do you know how many nobles in that room could have done the same?" "I don't. None." He squeezed her hand gently. "You're not just surviving, Rosalind. You're thriving. And it terrifies them." He released her hand. "Go. Rest. Tomorrow is another battle." She walked away on unsteady legs. But she walked, head high, spine straight, a queen in everything but name. Day 25, 62 days remaining. Rosa couldn't sleep. She wandered the palace corridors in her nightgown and robe, a candle in hand. The guards knew her now, nodded as she passed. Let her roam. She found herself near the West Wing, the administrative section, where Cassian held council meetings and managed the kingdom's affairs. Voices drifted from behind a closed door. She should walk away, should return to her room. Instead, she pressed her ear to the wood. No other choice. The girl must go. That was Duke Thaddeus Ravencroft, a man Rosa had met at dinner last week. Handsome, charming, cold eyes that assessed everything like commodities to be bought and sold. And if the king refuses, a woman's voice. Sharp, familiar. Lady Margaret. Rosa's heart stopped. "Then we remove the king." Silence. "You're talking about treason." Another man, younger, nervous. "I'm talking about survival. Cassian is weakened by this curse, distracted by the bastard girl. If we act now, we can claim the throne for someone stronger, someone pure. And who would that be? Does it matter? Anyone is better than a king shackled to a servant." Footsteps approached the door. Rosa fled. Ran silently down the corridor, her candle extinguished, her heart pounding. Treason. They were planning treason. Ravencroft. And Margaret. Her family had returned, not to visit, to conspire. She had to tell Cassian. She found him in the library. He sat at a large desk covered in maps and documents, a single lamp burning. He'd removed his crown, his coat, just shirt and vest sleeves rolled to his elbows. He looked up when she entered. "Rosalind, it's past midnight. I need to tell you something." She crossed to him quickly. "I overheard Duke Ravencroft. He's planning to remove you from the throne. To kill me. He has others working with him." She paused, swallowing hard. "Including Lady Margaret." Cassian's expression didn't change. "I know." "You what?" "I've known for weeks. Ravencroft has been building a coalition against me since the curse first struck. He sees weakness, opportunity, and your stepmother—" His jaw tightened. "She contacted him shortly after you arrived here, offered to help in exchange for Isolde's position as queen consort after my removal. And you've done nothing." "I've done everything. I have spies in his household. I know everyone he's recruited. I'm simply waiting for the right moment to act." He stood, came around the desk. "But thank you for warning me anyway. It shows you care about more than just yourself." "Of course I care. You've been—" She struggled for words. "Kind. You've protected me, defended me, given me a chance to be someone other than what my family made me." Cassian reached out, hesitated, then touched her cheek. The frost mark flared. Not with cold, with warmth. I was cursed to marry the first woman I touched, he said quietly. For 3 years I avoided everyone. I was terrified of this moment, terrified of condemning an innocent person to death alongside me. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. But now I wonder if maybe the curse wasn't a punishment. Maybe it was a gift in disguise. How can you say that? Because it brought you here, and for the first time in 3 years I don't feel alone. Rosa's breath caught. They stood close, close enough that she could see the flecks of silver in his blue eyes, close enough to feel the heat of his body, close enough to... Can you read ancient runes? He asked suddenly. The question shattered the moment. What? Cassian gestured to the desk. There's a text here, one of Aldebrand's old books about curse breaking, but portions are written in runes I can't decipher. If you have perfect memory, if you've read widely enough, maybe you can help. He pulled her toward the desk. The book lay open to a page filled with strange symbols, intricate patterns that looked like frost crystallized on glass. Rosa stared at them, and something in her mind clicked. I can read these, she whispered. What? I can read them. I don't know how, but I can see what they say. She leaned over the book, her finger tracing the lines. The curse of binding shall endure until truth's heart is revealed. Only one born of winter's blood may speak the words to sever the chain. Cassian gripped her shoulder. You can actually read that. Yes, it's like, she struggled to explain. Like my mind already knows the language. Like I've always known it, but never realized. That's impossible. Ancient runes can only be read by those with royal blood. By those descended from the first kings, the ones who wielded magic before it faded from the world. They stared at each other. Understanding dawned slowly, terribly. My mother, Rosa breathed. You said you'd investigate my heritage. What did you find? Nothing concrete yet. The records from Ashwood Manor are incomplete. But if you can read runes, then I'm not just a bastard. No, you're something far more valuable. The implications crashed over her like waves. If she had royal blood, legitimate royal blood from an ancient line, then she wasn't just a servant who stumbled into the palace. She was exactly what the curse needed. We need to find out who your mother really was, Cassian said, and we need to do it fast. Because if Ravencroft discovers you're valuable, truly valuable, he won't just try to kill you. What will he do? He'll try to take you for himself. Days 26 through 50 passed in a blur of research and growing danger. They searched through records, birth registries, marriage certificates, death notices. Cassian sent investigators to Ashwood Manor, to the village where Rosa was born, to every corner of the kingdom, and slowly, piece by piece, the truth emerged. Rosa's mother wasn't a maid named Miriam. She was Miriam Wintermere, last surviving princess of the Wintermere dynasty, a royal line that had fallen during the Blood Wars 40 years ago. She'd hidden herself as a servant to escape assassination, had fallen in love with Edmund Ashwood, had died giving birth to their child, a child who carried the last drops of Wintermere blood in her veins. Rosa sat in the library surrounded by documents that proved her heritage and felt like she was looking at someone else's life. I'm a princess, she said numbly. You are. Cassian stood at the window looking out at the mountains, the last of a fallen house, which means you have more legitimate claim to royalty than half the nobles currently sitting in my court. Does Lady Margareta know? I suspect she discovered it years ago and decided to bury it. Because if people knew you were Wintermere, they'd ask questions about why you were treated as a servant. They'd investigate, and they'd discover she'd been suppressing a royal heir. So she made me a bastard, made me nothing, to protect herself, and to protect Isolde. If you'd been recognized, you would have outranked her socially. You would have had access to education, marriage prospects, wealth. Rosa laughed. The sound was broken. I could have had a life. You still can. Cassian turned from the window. We have proof now, witnesses, documents. We can legitimize you, give you the name and title you were born to. What good will that do? I still have. She glanced at the frost mark. It had spread further up her arm, now darker than before. 37 days left. We're working on that too. The runes you translated mentioned truth's heart. If we can figure out what that means. A knock interrupted them. One of Cassian's advisors entered, his face pale. Your Majesty, Duke Ravencroft has invoked the hunt of proving. Ancient tradition demands your participation. He's specifically requested that Miss Ashwood attend as well. Cassian's jaw tightened. When? 3 weeks hence, Your Majesty. 3 weeks. That would put them at, Rosa did the math. Day 84, only 3 days before the curse deadline. It's a trap, she whispered. I know. Cassian dismissed the advisor with a wave. But we have no choice. To refuse would signal fear, weakness. It would give Ravencroft the excuse he needs to challenge my authority openly. Then I won't go. If you don't go, they'll say I'm hiding you, that I'm ashamed of you, that I know you're unworthy. I don't care what they say. I do. Cassian crossed to her, took her hands in his. The frost marks pulsed where their skin touched. We have 3 weeks to prepare, to gather evidence, to be ready for whatever Ravencroft plans. And if we're not ready, his smile was cold, dangerous. Then Duke Ravencroft will learn what happens to those who threaten what's mine. The 3 weeks passed in a heartbeat. Day 84 arrived with gray skies and the smell of rain. The hunting party assembled at dawn. 30 nobles on horseback, servants with eyes and weapons, beaters to flush game from the underbrush. Duke Ravencroft sat astride a white stallion, magnificent in hunting greens. He smiled when he saw Rosa approach on her smaller mare. Miss Ashwood, how delightful that you could join us. Your first royal hunt, I believe. Yes, your grace, she said quietly. Cassian appeared beside her on a black destrier that looked more like a war machine than a horse. He wore hunting leather, a crossbow strapped to his back, a knife at his belt. He looked like what he was, a king who'd survived 1,000 threats and would survive 1,000 more. Ravencroft, he said coldly, shall we begin? They rode into the forest, the trees closed around them like a fist. Oak and pine and birch, dense enough to block out the sun. The ground was soft with fallen needles, muffling the sound of hooves. Rosa rode between Cassian and one of his loyal knights, protected, safe, for now. An hour into the hunt, they split up. Different groups chasing different game, standard practice. Except Rosa noticed that somehow, through careful maneuvering, she'd been separated from Cassian. She was alone with Duke Ravencroft and 3 of his men, and someone else. Lady Margaret, dressed in riding habit, smiled coldly from her horse. Hello, Rosalind, she said. Surprised to see me. Rosa's blood ran cold. What are you doing here? The Duke was kind enough to extend an invitation. We have much to discuss about your situation. Ravencroft guided his horse alongside Rosa's. Your Majesty seems quite taken with you. It's remarkable. A bastard catching the eye of a king. I'm not a bastard, Rosa said clearly. I'm Wintermere. Ah, yes, your supposed royal blood. Margaret laughed. Convenient, isn't it, that you suddenly discover you're a princess just when you need legitimacy? The documents are real. Documents can be forged. Ravencroft's hand moved toward the crossbow at his saddle. And even if they're real, it doesn't matter. In 3 days, the king dies from the curse, and you die with him. The men behind her moved closer, boxing her in. Rosa's mare danced nervously, sensing tension. Unless, Ravencroft continued, you'd like to propose an alternative arrangement. What arrangement? You marry me instead. We claim the curse transferred when the king failed to complete the marriage in time. With your Wintermere blood and my political power, we could rule together. Margaret leaned forward. And Isolde would be your lady-in-waiting. A nice position for my daughter, don't you think? Better than what she'd get with you dead. Rosa stared at them. You're insane. We're pragmatic. Ravencroft's eyes were cold. But if you refuse, he raised the crossbow, pointed it directly at her, then I'm afraid you're about to have a tragic hunting accident. Rosa's mind raced. She was trapped. 3 men behind, Ravencroft and Margaret beside her. Dense forest on both sides. She had no weapon, no way to fight. But she had her voice. If I die, she said clearly, the curse will kill the king in 3 days. And when he dies, his heir takes the throne. Prince Aldrich of the Northern Reach, who commands the largest army in the kingdom and has sworn to execute any traitor who harms the king or his betrothed. She saw doubt flicker in Ravencroft's eyes. You're bluffing. Am I? Ask your scholars. Ask anyone who understands curse magic. If one half of a binding dies, the other half follows. You kill me, you kill the king. And then you face Prince Aldrich's wrath. But the king will die anyway in 3 days. Unless we marry, Rosa interrupted, which we're planning to do. Tomorrow, actually. The wedding is already arranged. The invitation's sent. By this time tomorrow, I'll be queen, and you'll be a traitor who tried to assassinate the queen consort. It was a lie. They hadn't planned a wedding, but Ravencroft didn't know that. The crossbow lowered slightly. You're cleverer than I thought. I read a lot. Margaret's face twisted with rage. Shoot her anyway. I don't care about the consequences. I want her dead. Be silent, woman, Ravencroft snapped. I won't hang for your vendetta. He lowered the crossbow completely, turned his horse. This isn't over, girl. Wedding or no wedding, you're living on borrowed time. He spurred his horse forward, but Margaret didn't follow. She pulled something from her riding coat, a small crossbow, a lady's weapon. If he won't do it, she hissed, I will. She fired. The bolt flew straight and true. Rosa tried to turn her horse. Too late. The bolt struck her in the shoulder. Pain exploded through her body. She screamed, falling from the saddle, hitting the ground hard. The world spun, went dark at the edges. She heard shouting, hoofbeats, then a voice, Cassian's voice. Rosalind! And everything went black. Rosa woke to darkness and pain. Not just her shoulder, though, that throbbed with every heartbeat. This pain went deeper, bone deep, blood deep. The curse. She tried to sit up. Couldn't. Her body wouldn't obey. Don't move. Eleanor's voice thick with tears. Please, miss. The physician says you need to rest. Rosa's eyes adjusted to the dim light. She was in her room, curtains drawn, candles burning low. Eleanor sat beside the bed, her face pale and drawn. Cassian stood at the window, his back to her, rigid, silent. How long? Rosa's voice was a rasp. One day, Eleanor said softly. You've been unconscious for 1 day. 1 day. Rosa looked at her wrist. The frost mark had consumed her entire arm now. Black as charcoal, spreading across her shoulder, creeping toward her heart. And it was cold. So cold. The curse, she whispered. Cassian turned. He looked like he'd aged a decade, dark circles under his eyes, hollow cheeks, hands clenched into fists. The attack accelerated it, he said. His voice was empty, broken. When you were shot, when you nearly died, the curse interpreted it as a failed binding. It's consuming you faster now. How long? He couldn't answer. Aldebrand stepped from the shadows. The old physician looked ancient, exhausted. 2 days, Miss Ashwood, he said quietly. Perhaps less. The curse has entered its final stage. If you don't marry within 2 days, you both die. 2 days. Rosa couldn't breathe. She'd thought she had time. 3 more days until the deadline. Time to plan, to prepare. But Marsh Rehardazero had stolen that. Then we marry, she said. Today. Now. Cassian crossed the room in 3 strides, fell to his knees beside the bed. You can barely stand. You're dying, Rosalind. I won't ask you to marry me like this. You're not asking. I'm telling you. She managed to lift her hand, placed it over his. The frost marks blazed where they touched. I didn't survive 24 years of abuse and 3 months of assassination attempts just to die in this bed. If we're going to die, we die fighting. Together. Tears slipped down Cassian's cheeks. I don't want you to die at all. Then marry me. She squeezed his hand. Marry me and we'll figure out the rest. He leaned forward, pressed his forehead to hers. Tomorrow, he breathed. We marry tomorrow. I'll arrange everything. Why not today? Because Ravencroft and Margaret are demanding an emergency council session. They're claiming you're too ill to consent to marriage, that I'm forcing you. They're trying to delay until the curse kills us both. He pulled back. His eyes were ice, fury barely contained. But I'm not letting them win. Tomorrow at noon we marry, with or without the council's blessing. And then, his smile was terrible. Then I deal with the traitors. The council chamber was a circle of judgment, the same room where this had all begun, where Cassian had first announced Rosa as his intended bride. Now she sat in one of those high-backed chairs, again wearing a borrowed dressing gown, because she was too weak to dress properly. Her skin was gray, her lips nearly blue, the frost mark visible at her collar spreading like black ice across her skin. She looked like death, and the council looked at her like she deserved it. Duke Ravencroft stood at the head of the table, magnificent in formal robes. Beside him, Lady Margaret, dressed in mourning black as if Rosa were already dead, and beside her, surprisingly as old, looking nervous, uncertain. Cassian sat across from them, his hand on the hilt of his sword, ready for violence. Let's begin, Ravencroft said smoothly. Your Majesty, we've called this emergency session out of concern. Concern for Miss Ashwood's well-being, and concern for the integrity of the crown. Get on with it, Cassian growled. Very well. Ravencroft pulled a document from his robes. We have evidence that Miss Ashwood is not who she claims to be. that her so-called royal heritage is a fabrication designed to legitimize a marriage that should never occur. He set the document on the table. This is Rosalind's birth certificate, the original obtained from the church records in her birth village. It clearly states Mother Miriam, father unknown. Margaret stepped forward. Edmund Ashwood claimed her out of pity. Nothing more. She has no Ashwood blood, no Windermere blood. She's a foundling, a nobody. Isolde's voice was small. Mother, that's not... Be silent, girl. But Isolde didn't stay silent. She stood up, her hands shaking. It's not true, she said louder. The birth certificate Mother showed you is a forgery. I helped her create it last week in secret. The room went silent. Ravencroft turned slowly. What did you say? I said it's a forgery. Isolde's voice cracked. Tears streamed down her face. Mother made me help her. She said if we could prove Rosalind was illegitimate, the king would have to choose me instead. She said I'd be queen, but She looked at Rosa. I can't do this anymore. I can't keep lying. Margaret's face went white with rage. You stupid, stupid girl. I'm sorry, Isolde sobbed. I'm sorry for everything. For the abuse, for the poison, for the arrow. I know you hate me, Rosalind. I deserve it. But I can't let Mother kill you. Not like this. She pulled something from her dress, the real birth certificate. This is the original. It clearly names Edmund Ashwood as father, and Miriam's full name, Miriam Elise Windermere of the Fallen House. She set it on the table with trembling hands. Rosalind is exactly who the king says she is. A princess, my sister. And I've spent my whole life hating her for being better than me. Cassian stood slowly, took the document, examined it. Then he looked at Ravencroft. Your evidence just collapsed. Anything else? Ravencroft's composure finally cracked. This is absurd. You're going to believe the girl's sister? Of course she'd lie to protect her. I'm not lying, Isolde cried. I'm finally telling the truth. It doesn't matter, Margaret shrieked. Look at her, she's dying. The curse is killing her because she's not worthy. The magic itself rejects her. The curse is killing her, Cassian said coldly. Because someone shot her during the hunt. Someone who violated sacred law by bringing weapons to a hunt of proving. Someone who committed attempted murder in front of witnesses. He gestured to the guards. Arrest Lady Margaret Ashwood. Charge attempted murder of the king's betrothed. You can't do this. Margaret backed away. I'm a noblewoman. I demand trial by peers. You'll get one after the wedding. Cassian's smile was ice. And I suspect your peers will be very interested to hear about your conspiracy with Duke Ravencroft. He turned to Ravencroft. As for you, I have evidence of your treason, letters, witnesses, confessions from your men. You've been planning to seize the throne since the moment the curse activated. Ravencroft remained calm. Prove it. Gladly. Cassian pulled a stack of documents from his coat. Letters with Ravencroft's seal, testimony from soldiers, bank records showing payments to assassins. I've been building this case for weeks. I was waiting for you to make your move, to show your hand completely. And at the hunt, you did exactly that. He threw the documents on the table. You tried to have Rosalind killed. You conspired with a known criminal. You violated the sacred laws of the hunt. And you plotted to overthrow your king. He stepped closer. The penalty for any one of those crimes is death. Combined, his voice dropped to a whisper. I could have you drawn and quartered in the square tomorrow. Ravencroft's mask finally fell. Fear flickered in his eyes. I demand mercy. I'm a duke. My family has served the crown for... Your family will be stripped of all titles and lands. Your name will be erased from the noble registry. And you, Cassian smiled, you will spend the rest of your life in the palace dungeons, alone in darkness, thinking about what you've lost. He gestured to the guards. Take him away. They dragged Ravencroft out. He screamed, threatened, begged. The doors slammed shut. Margaret was next. She went silently, all fight gone, leaving only Isolde. She stood alone, crying, looking lost. Cassian studied her for a long moment. You helped forge documents. You poisoned Rosalind at the banquet. You participated in multiple conspiracies. By rights, I should execute you alongside your mother. Isolde sank to her knees. I know. I deserve it. But you also just confessed, provided evidence, helped break your mother's plan. He glanced at Rosa. What would you have me do with her? Everyone looked at Rosa. She looked at her half-sister, the golden-haired beauty who'd tormented her for 24 years, who'd ground her heel into Rosa's burned hand, who'd laughed when Rosa was sent to die. She should want revenge, should want Isolde to suffer. But looking at her now broken, crying, genuinely remorseful Rosa felt only exhaustion. Exile, she said quietly. Strip her of the Ashwood name. Give her a new identity. Send her somewhere far from here to start over. Let her learn what it's like to be nobody. Cassian raised an eyebrow. That's more mercy than she deserves. I know, but I'm tired of carrying hatred. Rosa looked directly at Isolde. You spent your whole life jealous of me, hating me, and look where it got you. You have nothing now. You are nothing now. That's punishment enough. Isolde sobbed harder. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I know you are. Now go, and don't come back. Guards escorted Isolde out. The council sat in stunned silence. Cassian turned to them. Tomorrow at noon I marry Rosalind Wintermere Ashwood. Anyone who objects can join Ravencroft in the dungeons. Anyone who supports us, he smiled. You're invited to the wedding. No one objected. Good. Now get out. All of you. They fled, leaving Cassian and Rosa alone. He crossed to her, knelt beside her chair. You were magnificent, he said softly. I feel like I'm dying. You're not. I won't let you. He took her hands. Tomorrow we marry. The curse breaks. And then we have the rest of our lives to figure out how we feel about each other. I already know how I feel about you, Rosa whispered. How? I love you. I think I've loved you since the moment you apologized for hurting me, since you called me a guest instead of a prisoner, since you fought for me every single day. Cassian's breath caught. I don't know if I know how to love, he said. I've been alone so long, cold for so long. But if love is this desperate need to keep you alive, to keep you safe, to keep you by my side. He leaned forward, pressed his lips to hers. Then I love you too. The kiss was soft, gentle, full of promise. When they pulled apart, the frost marks glowed warm, not yet broken, but soon. Rest, Cassian murmured. Tomorrow is our wedding day. Tomorrow, Rosa agreed. And despite everything, the pain, the exhaustion, the curse eating her alive, she smiled. The wedding happened in chaos and beauty. They had less than 24 hours to prepare. The palace erupted into organized madness. Servants running everywhere, seamstresses working through the night, florists arranging hothouse roses and winter lilies, cooks preparing a feast for 300 guests. And in the center of it all, Rosa. She could barely stand. Eleanor and two other maids had to support her as they laced her into a wedding gown hastily altered from the royal archives. White silk and silver embroidery, a train that stretched 12 feet, sleeves that covered her frostmark, now consuming her entire upper body. Beautiful, Eleanor whispered, tears streaming down her face. You look like a queen. Rosa looked at herself in the mirror. She did look like a queen, not because of the dress or the jewels or the crown of winter roses in her hair, but because of the way she held herself, the strength in her spine, the determination in her eyes. She'd survived, and in an hour she would become queen. The cathedral bells began to ring. The cathedral was ancient, built 500 years ago from white stone and stained glass. Light streamed through windows depicting saints and angels casting rainbow shadows on the assembled nobles. Every seat was filled. Standing room only, the entire kingdom had come to witness this wedding. The bastard servant marrying the cursed king. It was the scandal of the century. Rosa walked down the aisle alone. No father to give her away, no family to support her. Just herself. Eleanor and two maids walked behind her, holding her train, ready to catch her if she fell, because she was dying. Everyone could see it. The gray skin, the blue lips, the frost mark visible even through the high collar of her dress. But she walked anyway, head high, spine straight. With each step she claimed her power, her right to be here, her worth. Cassian waited at the altar. He wore black and silver, the colors of winter. His crown caught the light like captured stars. When he saw her, his expression crumbled, joy and grief warring on his face. You're beautiful, he whispered when she reached him. I'm dying. Not for long. The archbishop began the ceremony. Ancient words in ancient tongue, blessings and prayers and invocations of gods, both old and new. But the ceremony was abbreviated, fast, because they had minutes, not hours. I, Cassian, Frostborn King of Glacium, take you Rosalind Wintermere Ashwood to be my wife, my queen, my partner in all things. From this day until my last day, through curse and blessing, through darkness and light. His voice was steady, strong. Rosa's was not. I, Rosalind Wintermere Ashwood, take you, Cassian Frostborn, to be my husband, my king, my choice freely made. From this day until... She stumbled. Her legs gave out. Cassian caught her, held her up. Until my last day, she finished, through curse and blessing, through darkness and light. The archbishop raised his hands. By the power vested in me by the gods in this kingdom, I pronounce you husband and wife. May your union bring light to the darkness. May your love break all curses. May your... Skip to the end, Cassian interrupted. Please. The archbishop nodded. You may kiss your bride. Cassian pulled Rosa close. She was so cold in his arms. Like ice. He kissed her anyway. Softly. Desperately. Pouring everything he felt into that kiss. And the frost marks erupted with light. Not cold light. Not the black light of curse activation. Gold light. Warm and brilliant and alive. It spread from their wrists up their arms across their chests over their hearts. The entire cathedral filled with golden radiance so bright people had to shield their eyes. The curse was breaking. Rosa felt it shatter inside her like ice under spring sun. The cold that had been killing her melted away. The weight on her chest lifted. Color returned to her skin. Warmth flooded her veins. She could breathe again. Really breathe. When the light faded, the frost marks were gone. Not disappeared. Transformed. Instead of frost, delicate golden vines wrapped around their wrists. Beautiful. Permanent. A reminder of what they'd survived. A bond freely chosen. The crowd erupted into cheers. Cassian lifted Rosa off her feet, kissing her again. Longer this time. Deeper. And Rosalind Wintermere Ashwood, frostborn queen of Glacium, kissed her husband back. She'd survived. No. She'd triumphed. The coronation happened the same day. No point in waiting. No point in delaying. Cassian led Rosa to the throne room, the same room where she'd stood just 3 months ago, terrified and alone, condemned to death. Now she walked in as queen. He seated her in the throne that had sat empty for a decade, placed the crown on her head himself. Queen Rosalind, he announced to the assembled court, first of her name, last of House Wintermere. My wife, my partner, your queen. The court knelt. Every noble, every servant, every person in that vast room went to their knees. For her. Rosa looked out at them, saw faces that had mocked her, pitied her, tried to destroy her. Now they knelt. Rise, she said. Her voice carried through the chamber. Strong, clear, royal. They rose, and Rosa gave her first decree as queen. Effective immediately, all laws regarding illegitimate children are abolished. No child will be punished for the circumstances of their birth. No child will be denied education, inheritance, or opportunity because of who their parents were or weren't. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Furthermore, I'm establishing a fund for orphaned and abandoned children, paid for by new taxes on noble estates. Every child in this kingdom deserves a chance. Every child deserves to know they matter. She looked at Cassian. He nodded, smiling. And finally, I'm creating a new position in the court, an advocate for the powerless. Someone who will investigate claims of abuse, neglect, and injustice among the servant class. Because no one should have to endure what I endured. No one should have to survive what I survived. Not anymore. Not in my kingdom. The crowd was silent, stunned. Then from the back, someone started clapping. A servant, an older woman with work-worn hands. It spread, through the other servants, through some of the nobles, through the guards at the doors, until the entire throne room thundered with applause. Cassian took her hand, squeezed it. Well done, my queen. Thank you, my king. And for the first time in her life, Rosalind felt like she was exactly where she belonged. 1 year later, winter had come to Glacium. True winter, not cursed cold, but natural snow. Clean and white and beautiful. The anniversary celebration of the royal wedding filled the palace with music and laughter. Rosa stood in the ballroom, her daughter sleeping peacefully in her arms. Princess Miriam, named for the grandmother she'd never known. She had her mother's gray eyes, her father's dark hair, and when she smiled, she looked like hope made flesh. Cassian swept up to them, elegant in formal wear. May I have this dance, my queen? I have my hands full, my king. Then dance with me anyway. He took Miriam gently, cradled her against his chest with one arm, offered his free hand to Rosa. They danced, slowly, carefully, a family moving as one. Round them, the court celebrated. Nobles in their finery, servants promoted to positions of honor, common people invited to celebrate with royalty for the first time in the kingdom's history. Change was happening, slowly, but inevitably. And at the center of it all, Rosa, the girl who'd been nothing, who'd become everything. A movement at the edge of the ballroom caught her eye, a servant, younger, golden-haired but worn-looking, carrying a tray of empty glasses. Isolde, she'd returned, not as a noble, but as she'd been sentenced a servant, working in the palace kitchens under a new name. She looked at Rosa, at the crown, at the baby, at the king holding them both, and Rosa saw it in her face, the moment of understanding, the realization that this was forever, that Rosa had won completely and utterly, that there was no going back. Isolde's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. She held Rosa's gaze, and then slowly she curtsied. A servant's curtsy, deep, respectful, acknowledging her queen. Rosa inclined her head, just slightly, an acknowledgement in return. Then Isolde turned away, disappeared into the crowd, and Rosa felt peace. No triumph, no anger, no satisfaction, just peace. She'd won. But more importantly, she'd survived. She'd transformed. She'd become someone worthy of the crown she wore, not because of her blood, but because of her choices. "What are you thinking?" Cassian asked softly. Rosa looked up at him, at their daughter, at the golden vines around her wrist that had replaced the curse mark. "I'm thinking," she said, "that they called me a bastard my whole life. They said I was worthless, broken, undeserving of love or happiness or respect. And they were wrong about everything." She stood on her toes, kissed him, softly, sweetly. "I'm not broken. I'm not worthless. I'm not a mistake." "What are you then?" Rosa smiled, full and genuine and radiant. "I'm a queen, a wife, a mother, and most importantly," she looked around the ballroom, at the servants dancing alongside nobles, at the children of all stations playing together, at the kingdom she was helping to transform. "I'm exactly who I was always meant to be." The music swelled. The snow fell softly outside the windows, and Queen Rosalind Wintermere Ashwood Frostborn held her family close and knew with absolute certainty that she was finally home. The cold king had been cursed to marry the first woman he touched. He'd accidentally collided with the fleeing maid. The curse activated. 87 days. Wed or die. But that maid wasn't just a servant. She was a survivor, a fighter, a queen in waiting. Together they broke the curse, defied fate, built a kingdom where love mattered more than bloodlines, where strength came from surviving, where queens could be born in attics and wear their scars like crowns. The story could have ended in tragedy. Instead, it ended in triumph. And the kingdom learned what real power looks like. Not the power of birth or title or wealth, but the power of choice, of resilience, of refusing to be broken by those who would see you destroyed. Rosalind Ashwood was sent to die. Instead, she became the queen who changed everything, and that made all the difference.